The road leaving Delhi is all industrial and modern, and I enter the state of Haryana, where an election has been fought, won, and lost. My first destination is the town of Ballabhgarh, at the time a strategic fort on the highway between Delhi and Agra. The fort is long gone, but the palace still remains. Bishop Heber says that he was not prepared for the splendor with which he was received by the Raja himself, a fat and overgrown man. This was Raja Ram Singh, who was the regent at the time. The heyday of Ballabhgarh came under the son of Ram Singh, Raja Nahar Singh, who sat on the throne in 1829. This palace, which is reasonably well maintained, functions partly as a hotel. When I visit, the place has been prepared for a movie shoot. Bishop Heber had been seated here for a few minutes when a set of dancing girls entered the room, followed by two musicians. He admits he felt a little uneasy at this apparition, but his companion assured him that nothing approaching indecency was to be looked at in the dances or songs that a well bred Hindu exhibited to his visitors. The singers sung a Persian and Hindustani song with pleasing voices. Bishop Heber gave them appropriate gratuity. Some cake and Persian grapes were brought in, and Bishop Heber then left in the most cordial way he could, declining the usual presents. On his way out, Bishop Heber offered the usual bakshish to the Raja's servants, but they politely declined. Bishop Heber says this was the first instance in which he had seen a Hindu refusing money. Here in this palace, Bishop Heber was entertained by Raja Ram Singh. He describes a high and gentlemanly feeling between the Raja and the British. That feeling did not last long. The son of Ram Singh, Nahar Singh, was hanged by the British for his part in the rebellion of 1837. Raja Nahar Singh was hanged in Chandni Chowk on 9th January 1858, a day that is observed as Balidan Divas in Haryana to this day. This whole area is ridiculously urbanized, and there really isn't anything to see. Until, by the side of the road, you see a monument that is several hundred years old. There are only about 110 of them left, but back when Bishop traveled, these were a constant feature on the Mughal highway. He must have seen many of them. These phallic highway markers were a distinct feature of the road in Mughal times and a critical part of the transportation and communication infrastructure. Sir Thomas Roe called them a miracle of India. Over time, they have lost their importance. The Grand Trunk Road is a great place to see many of the ones that are left. My next stop is Hodal, a dusty, hot little town in Haryana. Here Bishop Heber came upon a fine tank that was constructed by the former Jamadar or administrator of this district, probably in the late 1700s. Nearby, he found a little temple raised in the memory of the same Jamadar. The temple commemorated the sati of his favorite wife, who had immolated herself on his funeral pyre. Inside the temple, Bishop Heber found the representation of 4 feet, too small and too big. Outside the temple, I see the usual swastikas and red handprints. I've seen them before, commemorating sati in the forts of Rajasthan. Inside, I see the four footprints. Somewhere between Hodal and Dotana, Bishop Heber crossed into Agra province. Even today, the border between Haryana and Uttar Pradesh is between these two towns, which again reminds us how much of India's geography is ancient. They're really into building ginormous religious statues in these parts. Bishop Heber passed by Vrindavan but did not visit, with little regret, its mean and ancient buildings. Acquired by the East India Company in 1803, Mathura was very much a frontier town. Bishop Heber visited because there was a large cantonment of British troops in Mathura. He did pay a visit to the old city, which was lined with old mansions, some of which still remain. Bishop Heber visited the brand new Dwarkadish temple, just constructed a few years ago and not quite finished. This was built by Gokul Das Parikh, who was the treasurer of the Scindias and a big banker. Mathura was one of the bigger banking centers in India. Bishop Heber describes the richly carved gateway and the temple inside, where all the pillars and the ceiling are carved, painted, and gilt. The effect, he says, is much like that of an Egyptian tomb. I have never been to an Egyptian tomb, but the effect very much is like that of a jewel box. This temple is impossible not to like. Late in the evening, I go to the ghats of the Yamuna, which seems wide and strangely clean downstream from all the sewage coming from Delhi. That is almost certainly not true. This is the ghat that Edwin Lord Weeks painted in the 1880s with his usual sympathy for Indian characters. I look for one last place to visit in Mathura, the Jama Masjid or the Royal Mosque, its minaret barely visible through the crowded streets. The Jama Masjid was painted by Edwin Lord Weeks as well as a remarkably beautiful structure with its jewel-like door. Today, it is nearly impossible to reach or photograph, and I am told a source of some religious tension. Agra is busy, but the entire area around the Taj Mahal has been redone, and the pedestrian approach looks beautiful in the dawn. Of the Taj Mahal, Bishop Heber, this brutal critic, says, I went to see the celebrated Taj Mahal. After hearing its praises ever since I had been in India, I must say its beauty rather exceeded than fell short of my expectations. There was much that I was not prepared for, and even today, a visitor to the Taj feels unprepared for the incredible beauty of this place. The gateway to the Taj, on its own, would have been a magnificent monument. Unlike Humayun's tomb, Taj Mahal was placed at the end of a charbagh garden. Visitors walked through the garden with its rich foliage, many hundred plants, mango, lemon, pomegranate, hibiscus, and jasmine plants. The monument revealed itself slowly to visitors. The garden eventually fell into disarray. Lord Curzon, who was on a civilizing mission in India, believed that gardens should be flat and formal. He ordered the trees to be removed. The flowers had to go as well. The Mughal Charbagh garden became a British garden. It is impossible to find the words in any language to do justice to this most photographed monument in the world. So I'll quote Rabindranath Tagore, his poem, translated by Kshitish Roy. You knew Shah Jahan, life and youth, wealth and glory, they all drift away in the current of time. You strove therefore to perpetuate only the sorrow of your heart. Let the splendor of diamond, pearl, and ruby vanish like the magic shimmer of the rainbow. Only let this one teardrop, this Taj Mahal, glisten spotlessly on the cheek of time forever and ever. O King, you are no more. Your empire has vanished like a dream. Your throne lies shattered. Your minstrels sing no more. Your musicians no longer mingle their strains with the murmuring Jamuna. Despite all this, the courier of your love, untarnished by time, unwearied, unmoved by the rise and fall of empires, unconcerned with the ebb and flow of life and death, carries the ageless message of your love from age to age. Never shall I forget you, beloved. Never. Bishop Heber claims that he saw remains of a bridge across the Yamuna built by Shah Jahan with the intention of building a second Taj across the river. This so-called Black Taj is really a very old rumor of which there is very little evidence. The great emperor and his queen are interned in the basement where photography is strictly prohibited. Agra Fort, as it is seen today, was built on the site of earlier fortifications by Akbar in 1565. When Bishop Heber visited on January 12, 1825, this was a working fort with a full British garrison stationed inside. The high walls and the moat also provided safety to the British during the revolt of 1857. Inside the fort is a mishmash of structures, some built by Akbar, some by Shah Jahan and later Mughals, including Jahangir's bathtub. This older part of the fort, clearly constructed by Akbar, was in bad shape, disfigured and destroyed by neglect, and used as warehouses, armories, offices, and lodging rooms for the garrison when Bishop Heber visited. The change in style as one comes to more later constructions is striking and obvious. There is much more use of marble. Nearby is a very quirky historical artifact. Messing with Hindu and Muslim sentiments to secure their ends was a favorite British pastime. These gates were brought back by the British from Afghanistan at the end of their Great Afghan Misadventure in 1842, supposedly righting a historical wrong done to Hindus. The intention was to return sandalwood gates of Somnath, which were installed at the mausoleum of Mahmud of Ghazni. Turns out, these gates are made of deodar and likely a later creation. This was considered a major embarrassment at the time, and the issue even came up in British Parliament. Much of the fort is off limits to visitors even today, but the highlight of the parts that can be visited is the Khas Mahal. These were the apartments of Jahanara, the daughter of Shah Jahan. The jali work here is absolutely exquisite. The thin, translucent marble screens are otherworldly in the morning light. Nearby, overlooking a large courtyard, is a large empty space. This is where the hammam or the bathhouse used to be. The workmanship of this hammam was exquisite, and it contained a bathtub made of a single block of marble. In 1811, Marquis of Hastings felt like he wanted to take it with him to Agra. The collector and magistrate of the place assured him that the pride of ancient splendor was incomprehensible to the people of Agra. The bathtub was priced out, but could not be taken as it was too large for the budgeroos at use at the time. Eventually, the entire place was demolished. The bathtub was broken up and sold into trinklets, and the colonnades of the place were taken out. Some of them made their way to the circuit house in Agra, where they stand to the day. And some of the colonnades, very interestingly, made their way to the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, where I find them in their catalogue. Notice the pattern on these colonnades is identical to the ones I see at Circuit House in Agra. Easily the most poignant structure in the entire complex is the Shah Burj or the Muttaman Burj, now sadly completely off limits to visitors. This is where Shah Jahan spent the last 7 years of his life, looking at the Taj Mahal wistfully. The vengeful Aurangzeb severely restricted his father's life. The great Mughal emperor was reduced to a life of deprivation. When his slippers wore out, Aurangzeb refused to provide new ones, forcing Shah Jahan to shuffle through his final years in tattered footwear. The passing of Shah Jahan by Abindranath Tagore, the nephew of Gurudev, is an exquisite miniature painting now at the Victoria Memorial in Kolkata. It captures the final moments of Shah Jahan's life, depicting him gazing longingly at the Taj with his devoted daughter Jahanara by his side. The painting was widely acclaimed after completion, winning many medals. There is much to see in Agra Fort, but not being able to enter Shah Burj leaves me with a very disappointed feeling. The Moti Masjid, that exquisite mosque, is also off limits to visitors. While it is a fact that the British damaged many heritage structures in India, the Diwan-e-Am in Agra Fort, for example, was used as an arsenal. It is also a fact that many British were appalled by the recklessness. The bishop felt that the damage done by the Marquess of Hastings to the Agra Fort, the removal of the fountain and the hammam, were a wanton and reckless act. In fact, much of what we recognize as heritage today in India is the result of careful preservation by the British. The tomb of Emperor Akbar was a popular stopover for the British. This aquatent by Thomas Daniel shows how the gateway to the tomb looked like in 1795. This also depicts nicely how the Daniels traveled. Notice the tents set up with full furnishings, the soldiers hanging about, and the palanquin with the palanquin bearers. This print is from John Brown about 10 years before that by Thomas Daniel, shows the tomb just completely surrounded by disaster. The difference may not be real. John Brown may have been trying to give it a more romantic look. In both these depictions, the minarets are broken. They may have fallen down from earthquakes or because of the raids of the Jats. They were repaired by Lord Curzon in 1905. From close up, the carvings on the gateway are ornate and overwhelming. The side arcades, too, are a work of art. As I walk inside, my kind guide tells me that this building was completed in 1613 at the cost of 15 lakh rupees, which must have been an enormous fortune at the time. By the late 1700s, this tomb had fallen into serious disrepair. Bishop Heber documents that the British had sanctioned money for the repair and upkeep of this tomb. They had also planted sesame trees, donated by Nathaniel Wallich, the friend of Bishop Heber. By the time Fanny Parks sketched this tomb, it seems pretty good shape. One of only two men to be called the Great in Indian history, Emperor Akbar was a man of striking simplicity. In his lifetime, he did much to reconcile the complex elements of the Indian society and promote amity among its two major religions. Akbar himself picked the site for and planned his tomb at Sikandra. Jahangir, his son, was unhappy with the architecture and made several additions which account for the disjointed appearance of the tomb. Inside the tomb, particularly on the southern vestibule, there are some really ornate decorations. The jali work, as is typical for Mughals, is spectacular. A narrow inclined passage, like the entrance to an Egyptian pyramid, leads to a vaulted chamber where a simple sarcophagus of white marble contains the mortal remains of Emperor Akbar. In 1691, the Jats of Bharatpur desecrated Akbar's tomb itself. His bones were thrown about in a hunt for treasure and burnt in a macabre Hindu cremation twist to the remains of the great Mughal. This lamp, hanging above Emperor's tomb, was a gift from Lord Curzon. Pretty much everything in Sikandra is spectacular, but like so many other places in India, the most spectacular part is completely out of reach. I cannot persuade anyone to give me access to the top story. At the head of this altar tomb is the inscription Allahu Akbar, or God is great, and at the foot Jalla Jalaluhu, or magnificent is his glory. These sentences form the formula of the Nilahi, which some construe as Akbar's new religion. Leaving Agra, passing this Qus Minar with a strange filial on the top, I make my way to Fatehpur Sikri. This large, fortified town was built by Akbar and then, strangely, abandoned. Bishop Heber's tents were pitched in full view of the large ceremonial gate, or Buland Darwaza. Bishop Heber calls these steps the noblest flight of steps that he ever saw. This ceremonial gateway was built by Emperor Akbar to commemorate his victory in Gujarat. Bishop Heber completely misses the inscription on the gate. It says, Jesus, son of Mary, said, "The world is a bridge, pass over it, but build no houses upon it. He who hopes for a day may hope for an eternity, but the world endures but an hour. Spend it in prayer, for the rest is unseen." It seems like Akbar was instructing his followers in the impermanence of all things material. This quote is not in the Bible or in the Quran. It may have been something originated by Petrus Alfonsi, a Jewish convert to Christianity in Muslim Andalusia in the 12th century. Inside, then as now, Bishop Heber found a large quadrangle containing lofty cloisters, a fine marble tomb, a mosque, and multiple monuments. Bishop Heber insists that there is no quadrangle, either in Oxford or Cambridge, fit to be compared to this quadrangle, either in size or majestic proportions or beauty of architecture. As I walk through the cloisters, through this passageway, I can feel the weight of history. It's very hard to overstate how absolutely overwhelming the beauty of this small mosque is. The highlight, for many, is the marble tomb of Sheikh Salim Chishti, who Emperor Akbar revered. This entire settlement was built because of this saint. There is a lot to see in Fatehpur Sikri. You can spend days here. But I am taken around by my guide to see the four places that Bishop Heber visited and felt worthy of notice. The first was Birbal's house, this richly ornamented small apartment. Known for his quick wit, Birbal was Akbar's favorite minister. He died in Afghanistan near the Bolan Pass fighting, and his corpse was never found, an event which distressed Akbar tremendously. Musalman guides accused Birbal of having infected Akbar with the strange religious notion in the latter part of his life. The small canopy was shown to Bishop Heber as the place devoted by Akbar to the performance of magic rites. The Diwan-e-Khas is a singular pavilion, the center of which is a stone pulpit richly carved, approached by four stone galleries from different sides of the room. It is easy to imagine Emperor Akbar sitting in the center, being approached by his subjects from four different sides. Lastly, Emperor Akbar was taken to the house of one of Emperor Akbar's wives, who was said to be the daughter of the Sultan of Constantinople. It is exquisitely carved with trees, grapes, and the figures of different birds and beasts. The birds and the beasts were disfigured, apparently by Aurangzeb, who Bishop Heber thinks sought to make amends for his cruelty and wickedness towards his father and his brothers by more than a usual zeal for the tradition and observances of Islam. When Fatehpur Sikri was set up, a water supply was first established by the means of a dam that's right behind me. When Bishop Heber was here, you could still see the dam, although the lake was long since completely dry. He also saw remnants of the mechanism with wheels and cisterns used to raise water from this lake up to the palace. In the province of Agra, Bishop Heber entered the territory of the Jats of Bharatpur. The prosperity of this area stood in sharp relief against the poverty stricken regions under the East India Company around Delhi. The Raja of Bharatpur at the time was Baldev Singh. Bishop Heber, this man who makes great attempts to see cities and sights, is very careful to avoid going to Bharatpur, even though he was just a few kilometers away. He must have known, surely, that plans to remove Raja Baldev Singh were afoot. For Indian rulers, enmities and alliances were both fleeting and frequently changed. The English, on the other hand, never forgave and definitely never forgot, and were paranoid about their strength, knowing that it was based on deterrence. The heroic resistance of Bharatpur in 1805, when Lord Lake and his army under Lord Wellesley were unable to win Bharatpur fort, was seen as a blemish on British honour. British were just waiting for the right opportunity. Around the time of Bishop's visit, Lord Combermere was sent from England on the recommendation of Lord Wellesley himself, who was still smarting from the inability to take Bharatpur. Lord Combermere was a slave owner in the Caribbean, known to be somewhat stupid, and he arrived in Kolkata in October of 1825. In the meantime, Baldev Singh died within a month of Bishop Heber's visit, but he had wisely entrusted David Ochterlony with the responsibility that his 5-year-old son, Balwant Singh, be crowned the next king. Balwant Singh was then dethroned by Durjan Sal, the cousin of the young Raja, who imprisoned him. Ochterlony was on his way to Bharatpur to make the succession stick. For some reason, Lord Amherst was not willing to recognize Balwant Singh as the Raja and countermanded Ochterlony, who then died, as we saw earlier. Governor General Amherst then sent the slave owner, not so smart Combermere, at the head of a large army to take over Bharatpur. The fortress was considered impervious to artillery and was surrounded by a deep moat, but the moat was not filled with water, and Bharatpur was taken after a short siege on January 18, 1826. Balwant Singh was then installed on the throne by Lord Combermere, which is what Ochterlony was planning to do in the first place and could have been accomplished without bloodshed. But the defeat of Bharatpur was very important and sent a message, told all the Indian princes that any resistance to British rule was completely futile. Then followed an extraordinary saga. All the wealth of Bharatpur was looted in a systematic fashion by prize agents appointed to do so. Salt and grain owned by Bharatpur state was sold off. A heavy indemnity was extracted for the expenses of restoring Balwant Singh, and the state got so impoverished that it had to take a loan from an indigo farmer. This beautiful cheetah, owned by Durjan Sal, was taken by the idiot Lord Combermere to Barrackpore and added to the menagerie. Combermere, who had previously received compensation when he lost his 420 slaves in the Caribbean, was elevated to a viscount. His successors did very well, and the 6th Viscount holds office today, demonstrating that in England, thievery always pays off in the long run. Combermere also stole the famous Bharatpur gun and installed it outside the royal arsenal. The gun to this day is the logo of the Arsenal Football Club. Although he was careful to avoid visiting Bharatpur, Bishop Heber did spend some time at Weir, which also had a mud fort similar to the fort of Bharatpur at the time. The mud fort is long gone, but in Weir I find the stone castle of the Jat rulers, who were a very eclectic bunch. The architecture here shows a very heavy Mughal influence, and it is said that Raja Pratap Singh, who ruled Weir, was well educated in Persian and imitated the manner of Delhi, unlike his far more illustrious brother Surajmal, who remained more true to the earth. Bahadur Singh, the son of Pratap Singh, is said to have studied the Quran. The guardians of Weir Fort were aware something was afoot with the British and had been repairing the walls. They were reluctant to take Bishop Heber into their palace for fear that he was spying, which he almost certainly was. This fort surrendered to the British shortly after the fall of Bharatpur in 1826. I find the fort magnificently desolate and magnificently preserved. Bishop Heber was also taken to this garden with its flowering trees of pomegranate and oranges, watered by channels conducted from a large tank with many fountains around it. Today, this garden is in complete and utter disrepair. Bishop Heber observes that zealous Hindus, as the Jats are, they seem to agree very well with the Mussalmans. Many of Mussalmans live in Weir, and their priest, an infirm old man, came to pay his compliments to Bishop Heber. Dosa, from its name of Diosa, indicates a divine origin. Bishop Heber found the entire place in ruins and completely dilapidated. As I walk through the streets and alleys of Dosa, there are some of the most stunning gateways and ruins that I have seen anywhere in India. By this time, Bishop Heber was very familiar with the rhythms of Indian festivals, and in Dosa, he witnessed the festival of Basant Panchami. He describes a gilded rath taken through the streets of Dosa. I find the child who opens the doorway and shows me the gilded rath. The tradition of taking the deities in this rath is apparently 1100 years old. Bishop Heber saw also the accompaniments of a traditional mela with merrymaking, dancing and music, booths selling clothes, food and trinkets, and a fair amount of opium consumption. The priest at this temple tells me the mela, like so many of ancient traditions in India, is now almost extinct. Somewhere here on the dusty plain between Dausa and Jaipur, Bishop Heber ran into Sir David Ochterlony, who was on his way to Bharatpur to sort out the mess of Baldev Singh's succession. It was a cold morning on January 27, 1845. Bishop Heber describes David Ochterlony as old and infirm, but pleasant. He stepped out, completely covered in shawls, wearing a Mughal furred hat, and shook hands with the bishop in what must be seen as a momentous occasion. It is easy to be impressed, as Bishop Heber was, by the incredible arc of history which led to Bishop Heber and General Ochterlony shaking hands in the desert plain of Rajputana in the middle of nowhere. It is also easy to be impressed by the same arc of history that a few decades after the independence of India, the British are completely forgotten in these parts. David Ochterlony did not quite know it yet, but this was going to be his last journey. After his falling out with Amherst over the handling of the Bharatpur affair, Ochterlony resigned and died heartbroken in Meerut, where I saw his grave.